The day I arrived at the hospital, limping and leaning against a cold wheelchair, I heard my daughter-in-law's voice slice through the air like a knife. "Don't waste your time, doctor. She's already given all she had to give. I'm glad you're here. Follow my story to the end and tell me in the comments which city you're reading from. That way I can see how far my story has traveled. My name is Lourdes. I'm 69 years old. I've been a widow for more than a decade, and, for a long time, I thought the only thing left for me was to be Carlos and Ana's mother. Before that, I was a seamstress, a housewife, a devoted wife. But if you had asked me who I was, I probably would have answered, I'm their mother. That's how I saw myself, and that's how I believed they saw me too. I've always lived in the same simple little house, but full of history, where I raised my children. Every tile in the kitchen, every crack in the living room wall, everything there carried my sweat and my tears. The house was small, but the love I thought lived there was huge. At least, that's what I believed, that day. However, I was sitting in a hospital corridor, the smell of disinfectant burning my nose, and the sound of hurried footsteps echoing on the shiny floor. My leg throbbed after a silly fall on the sidewalk. I was scared, in pain, but nothing hurt more than those words, spoken by my own daughter-in-law, almost whispered, yet loud enough to tear apart what little dignity I had left. She's already given all she had to give. What do you mean I'd already given all I had to give? Was I an old piece of furniture? An appliance that doesn't work anymore? A burden you shove into a corner until someone finally decides to throw it away? The doctor, with that tired uncle face, looked at me over his glasses. Did you hear what she said? He asked, a bit embarrassed. I swallowed hard, feeling my face burn. I did, doctor, I replied. I just don't know what hurt more, the fall or the sentence. My son Carlos, standing next to her, pretended he hadn't heard anything. He avoided my eyes, kept fiddling with his phone, as if he were anywhere but there with me. He had always been my quietest boy, the most sensitive one, the one I used to defend from everything and everyone, but in that moment he looked more like the judge reading out my sentence, silent, absent, allowing them to decide for me, while the doctor talked about risks, tests, physiotherapy. I realized the conversation wasn't about helping me get better. It was about how it's going to be from now on, with Mrs. Lourdes, as if I were an object that needed to be relocated. Does she live alone? The doctor asked. She does, my daughter-in-law answered quickly, before I could open my mouth. And, she can't manage anymore. Doctor, we'd already been talking about it. Talking about what, exactly? About my life, my future, without me. In that moment, sitting in that wheelchair, I felt the ground open beneath me, but it wasn't the sidewalk where I had fallen. It was the ground of my own family. I looked at Carlos, desperate to hear one word in my defense, a simple, calm down, Patricia, don't talk like that, about my mother, but all I heard was, whatever you think is best, doctor. I never imagined that after so many years being their safe harbor, I would become the problem to be solved. In their minds, I was no longer the mother who stayed up all night, sewing to pay for their school, nor the woman who sold her wedding ring to buy her son's first school uniform. I was the old lady who lives alone and is becoming a lot of work. In that chilly corridor, with the hospital gown open at the back and the cold seeping in through the gaps, I felt something inside me crack. At the same time, a stubborn little thread of strength started to move deep in my chest. It was small, but it was there, already given all she had to give. Maybe that was exactly the moment I would find out if that was true, or if I still had a lot to give, just not in the way they were expecting. Before I tell you what happened on the day of my farewell, you need to understand who I was before I ended up in that corridor. I didn't just fall on the sidewalk. I fell from somewhere, much higher, from the pedestal where I had put myself, believing that a good mother is the one who cancels herself out, accepts everything quietly, and always finds a way even when she's bleeding on the inside. My conflict with them didn't start at that hospital. My daughter-in-law's sentence was just the final shout of a song that had been playing softly for years inside my house. Jokes about my age, decisions made without consulting me, questions like, so what do you plan to do with the house, Mrs. Lourdes? Impatient looks when I took too long to stand up from the chair. I thought I knew my family. I thought my children would be my shelter in old age, just like I'd been their shelter in childhood. But that day, when I heard she's already given all she had to give, I realized that, for them, I might be getting close to the end. What they didn't know is that, for me, that would be only the beginning. Because it was there, with a pen in my hand, staring at the discharge papers the doctor brought, that I had the first proof that, despite everything, there was still one thing that belonged only to me, my decision. He explained the risks, said the family preferred that I stay in the hospital, that it would be better for everyone. My daughter-in-law nodded, my son silently agreed, and I, with blurred vision, signed the discharge against their wishes. At that moment, I had no idea about the conversations they'd been having behind my back, the plans for a so-called farewell lunch, and the decisions they were making about my life, and, most of all, about my house. All I knew was that a battle had begun, and that I was no longer going to accept being treated like an object forgotten in some corner. But what I found out soon after changed everything. Now I'm going to tell you about my entire life of sacrifice, up until that hospital court round. How, without realizing it, I helped pave the way for the burden image they would later use against me. When I say that sentence from my daughter-in-law broke me inside, it's because it landed on top of a lifetime of giving. Nothing I had came easy, nothing fell from the sky. Everything was built stitch by stitch, with tears hidden in my pillow, and a forced smile early in the morning, pretending nothing was wrong. I married very young, to Joe. He was a construction worker, on job sites from sunup to sundown. I, with a simple sewing machine in the living room, stayed up all night hemming pants, sewing party dresses, school uniforms. We didn't have much, but we had a very clear plan to give our children what we never had. When Carlos was born, I was still working with my big belly pressed against the machine, feeling the baby move while the fabric slid through my fingers. I would talk to him right there. Hang in there, my son. Mommy's sewing your future. Anna came 4 years later, tiny, crybaby, with a head full of curls. I remember her running through the house with scraped knees and Carlos protecting his little sister from the boys on the street. He was always the sweetest, the one who saved his drawings to give me on Mother's Day, the one who asked for a kiss before bed. Joe died young, of a sudden heart attack, when Carlos was 13 and Anna was 9. That day, I was sure the ground was gone. I buried my husband and, along with him, buried any idea that I'd have someone to share life's weight with. At the wake, Carlos squeezed my hand so hard it hurt and promised, "Mom, I'll take care of you, okay? I'll be the man of the house." I believed him, and for many years, that promise was the medicine that kept me standing. After Jiro died, I increased my clientele. I started making uniforms for the whole neighborhood school, party clothes for all the neighbors. Some days I didn't even notice time passing. I started sewing before sunrise and only realized it was night because the street noise changed. Meanwhile, their education was sacred. There was one time the school organized a field trip for Carlos, something simple, but to him it was the whole world. A visit to a museum in the big city. The fee was too high for someone who could barely pay the electric bill. I sold my wedding ring. No one knows that. I still remember the sparkle in his eyes, wearing that little ID badge around his neck. "You didn't have to do that, Mom." "Oh, I did," I answered, holding back tears. "You're not going to miss seeing the world, just because we're poor." As for Anna, I don't even know where to begin. She was always more independent, more questioning, wanted to go to college, talk fancy, work in an office. I wore myself out at the sewing machine, but I made sure she had books, a cheap prep course, bus money so she wouldn't miss class. I used to say, "Go, my daughter, be whatever you want to be. Just don't forget where you came from." The house where I still live was built brick by brick with Joe, but kept standing by me. Every repair, every replaced tile, every coat of paint was paid with fabric in my hands, needle and thread. When damp spots appeared in the ceiling, I took on more work, accepted sewing a wedding dress, slept sitting up in the chair, but I didn't let the house fall apart. Time went by, and I watched my children fly. Carlos got a job in a building supply store, then moved up, got a better position. He met Patricia, my future daughter-in-law, at one of those company parties. She came into our lives well-dressed, talking fast, full of opinions. At first, I confess, I found her a bit strange. Her expression whenever she came into my simple house, smelling of food and damp cloth, said more than her words. But I tried to see the best in her. I thought, she's modern. She's from another time. That must be it. I never wanted to be the nagging mother-in-law who complains about everything. I swallowed my pride and smiled. Anna got into college and became the pride of the whole neighborhood. I went to parent meetings, even though I was embarrassed by my simple clothes, and listened to teachers saying she had a bright future. I was so proud. Every diploma, every certificate, I kept as if it were mine, and in a way, it was. But along with their achievements, things started happening that, at the time, I didn't recognize as warning signs. I called them modern life things. Today I know they were the first steps toward distance. Carlos no longer had time to come over on Sundays. Sometimes he'd call at the last minute. "Mom, we won't make it today, we're exhausted, it's been a long week." We meant him, Patricia, and, later, the 2 grandchildren who came and became my new reason to breathe. When they came, I'd bake cake, roast a chicken, and feel the house alive again. But in recent years, those visits grew more and more rare. Patricia started making comments that, at the time, I pretended not to hear. "Honey, this house is so full of stuff, it's dangerous for your mom," she'd say, looking around with a critical eye. "These old steps, that dark bathroom. One of these days, there's going to be an accident," I answered, trying not to sound offended. "I manage, Patricia. I've always managed." She gave a short smile, the kind that never reaches the eyes, and dropped, "But for how much longer, right, Mrs. Lords? We have to think about the future." She talked a lot about the future, never about the present, never about how do you want to live now. It was always in a planning logic about me, as if I were a project. Anna, meanwhile, got so caught up in work that she practically disappeared. She turned into that kind of person who calls in a rush, already apologizing because she has no time. "Mom, I'll stop by later, okay? My week's crazy." I'd say I understood that that's just how life is. But after hanging up, I'd keep staring at the door as if she might appear. I remembered when they were little and any fever meant a sleepless night for me. I remembered pushing my plate toward them and keeping the leftovers. Remembered going out with aching feet to walk Anna to school in the rain. Remembered lying on the floor with Carlos because he was scared of thunder. I had been their lap, their shield, their food, their medicine. And slowly, I became we have to decide what to do with her. There was one particular day that, looking back now, I see as a clear warning, a Sunday, when they came for lunch, and, in the middle of the conversation, Patricia asked, half joking, half serious, "Mrs. Lords, have you ever thought about selling this house and moving somewhere more comfortable?" "Comfortable for whom?" I asked, joking too, but wringing the dishcloth in my hands. She shrugged. "Oh, for everybody. A smaller apartment, with a doorman, no stairs, it'd be better." Carlos said nothing. He just pushed his rice around his plate, as if he hadn't heard. That day, I felt a little sting of discomfort, but I shoved it into a drawer inside me, along with so many other things I didn't want to face. I told myself, they're just worried about me. I turned every criticism into care, every suggestion into affection. It was easier than admitting. They might be seeing me as a problem to be solved. When my legs started failing long before the fall, I noticed Patricia's expression change. Whenever the subject was doctors or hospitals, her eyes hardened, her mouth tightened. I thought it was just impatience. I had no idea about the story she carried inside her, and how, in a twisted way, it was pushing her towards that cruel sentence. I didn't know that all that effort, all those years of stretching myself thin, would be used against me as proof that I was tired, worn out, at the end. Now I'm going to show you the first clear sign that something was very wrong, long before the fall on the sidewalk and that sentence in the hospital. The first clear sign that something was very wrong came on a Sunday I'd erase from my memory if I could. It was the day I realized that, in their heads, I was no longer a mother. I was the problem. Carlos had invited me for lunch at his new apartment. I knew he was proud of it. I was happy to be invited, of course. I woke up early, baked a cornmeal cake, his favorite, in my mind, put it in a nice baking tray, took the bus carefully, holding tight so I wouldn't lose my balance on the curves. My leg already hurt back then, but I didn't say a word. I didn't want to be seen as weak. When I arrived, the door was slightly open. I rang the bell and heard laughter inside. I stepped in slowly and announced, "I'm here." Patricia came over with a quick smile, the kind that appears and disappears before you can be sure it was really there. "Hi, Mrs. Lords. Come in, come in. Let me take that cake. It looks heavy." The living room was tidy, the table set with matching plates, sparkling glasses. The TV was on mute, just some random image on the screen. My grandkids ran to hug me, and right there I felt a little of that old joy. Grandma, did you bring cake?" the youngest asked, eyes shining. "I did. Cornmeal cake just the way your dad likes it." When Patricia heard that, she let out a little laugh. "Oh, but now he's on a diet, right, honey?" She looked at Carlos with that poking tone. "We're cutting back on flour, sugar, those things." It wasn't about the cake, I knew that, but I planted my feet in the kitchen floor and smiled. "That's fine. If he doesn't want any, I'm sure me and the kids can handle it." While I took off my coat, I noticed a folder on the sideboard, stuffed with papers. I recognized the logo of a health insurance company and a folded flyer with a nice building on it, all glass, and balconies, with the words, "Senior Home, Comfort and Care." My heart tripped. I grabbed the flyer before I even thought, "What's this?" Patricia turned quickly, almost yanking the paper from my hand. "Oh, nothing important, Mrs. Lords, work stuff." Carlos, coming in from the balcony, saw the scene. His eyes dropped to the flyer, then to me for a second. I caught a flash of guilt in his face, quick as lightning. Mom, leave that there. It's for a client, he said, putting a hand on my shoulder. Come on, lunch is almost ready. I put the flyer back down, but it kept pounding in my head. Senior home, comfort and daycare. Words pretty enough to hide the ugly truth. A place for people you no longer want to take care of. During lunch, I tried to talk about their lives, about Anna's job, about the kids. Patricia, though, had an impressive talent for turning any topic into a veiled criticism of me. You've been going to the doctor a lot, right, Mrs. Lords? She asked while serving salad. Carlos said your leg's been acting up. It's age, Patricia. We get a little rusty, I answered, trying to joke. That's what we were talking about the other day, she said, dropping the phrase in the middle of the table, about prevention. Before something more serious happens, the words echoed. Something more serious. I hadn't even fallen yet, but in her head it was, as if I were already on the floor. We've been looking into some options, she went on, and my stomach twisted, completely. There are some really nice places now, with nurses, physiotherapy, a recreation room. You'd make friends, you wouldn't be alone. The humiliation started right there, wrapped in polite smiles and soft voices. A home for the elderly, Patricia, I asked, feeling my face burn. Are you talking about putting me in a nursing home? Don't say it like that, Mom, Carlos cut in quickly. It's not a nursing home, it's an assisted living place. Assisted living is just a pretty way to say place to put old people. Carlos, he sighed deeply, as if I were a child throwing a tantrum. You're exaggerating, like always. The conversation went on, and I realized that lunch wasn't just a family gathering. It was a presentation of proposals. I was the agenda item. The topic of the meeting. We could sell your house, Mom, Carlos said, leaning on the table like he was discussing a business deal. Put everything in your name, invest part of it, pay the assisted living with the income and still have money left. Everything would be organized. Sell my house. My voice came out louder than I intended. The house you grew up in. Mom, don't make a scene, he muttered, looking around, embarrassed by my tone. You're not going to live forever. It's better to sort everything out now. That sentence cut me like a blade. You're not going to live forever. It's true, nobody will. But in that moment, it wasn't about reality. It was about how eager they were to get rid of an inconvenience. The grandkids, distracted by cartoons on TV, had no idea what was being negotiated over. My head right there at that table. I looked at their little faces and thought, will they remember Grandma's house as a place of affection, or as the house that was sold to get Grandma out of the way? I tried to argue. And what if I don't want to go anywhere? What if I want to stay in my house, with my things? Patricia crossed her arms. And when you fall, Mrs. Lords, when you need help for everything, who's going to quit their job to take care of you? We're already running all the time. Anna too. Nobody can just put life on hold. I grabbed the edge of the table. I never asked anyone to put their life on hold for me. She took a deep breath and delivered the first big humiliation, wrapped in pretend concern. You're stubborn, you know that, like a child. You don't see that you're getting She hesitated, then finished. Limited. Your mind's not the same. The silence was heavy. I felt like someone had sucked all the air out of the room. The worst part wasn't hearing that from her. The worst part was seeing Carlos say nothing. He didn't say, don't talk about my mother like that. He didn't say, she's fine. He just stayed quiet, fiddling with his napkin, as if he agreed. Limited, I repeated, my voice breaking. I may be old, Patricia, but my mind still works just fine. It works for some things, she shot back, with a tone that mixed impatience and a hint of pity. But you forget your meds, mix up appointment times, keep tripping. We're just trying to help. I wanted to stand up, slam my hand on the table, tell her to shut her mouth. I wanted to call Carlos a coward for not defending me, but instead, I did what I had done my whole life. I swallowed it. Only this time, it went down, tearing me apart. I left the table slowly, pretending I needed the bathroom. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman in front of me. Red eyes, trembling lips, white hair tied in a brushed bun. Maybe they're right, a part of me whispered. Maybe I really am becoming a burden. I went back to the living room as if I were walking back onto a battlefield. The subject had already changed. They were talking about the kids' school, traffic, politics. I sat down, pretending nothing had happened, but inside, a crack had opened. When it was time to leave, Patricia helped me put on my coat. Think about what we said with love, okay, Mrs. Lords? You don't want to end up falling somewhere and ending up in some random hospital. I just answered, nobody ends up in a hospital because they want to, Patricia. Carlos walked me to the elevator, hands in his pockets, Don't get upset, Mom. We're only thinking about what's best for you. Thinking about my best or what's best for your schedule? I asked, without looking at him. He didn't answer. The elevator arrived, and I stepped in with a heavy chest. That day, for the first time, I went back to my house feeling ashamed to walk in. I looked at the walls, the furniture, the little yard, and found myself thinking about his sentence. You're not going to live forever. It was as if, in their minds, my expiration date had already passed. What I didn't imagine is that the humiliation at that Sunday table was nothing compared to what they'd do later. Now I'm going to tell you how, after that conversation, my life truly began to fall apart, and how they turned my fragility into a weapon against me. After that Sunday lunch, I came home feeling smaller than when I'd left. It wasn't just the weight of the years on my back. It was the weight of their words, clinging to me like clothes I had never chosen to wear. You're not going to live forever. You're getting limited care. Home. My house, which had always been a refuge, suddenly became a stage for guilt. I looked at the steps at the entrance and no longer saw the kids racing down them on their way to school. I saw the picture Patricia painted with her words, me lying there, alone, forgotten, waiting for someone to find me. In the days that followed, everything around me seemed to go wrong at the same time. The fan burned out. A faucet started dripping nonstop. The light bill came higher than usual. Small things, but together they felt like a storm. I was still sewing, but much less. My eyesight was tired, my leg threatened to give out, and the customers slowly disappeared, preferring bigger stores and newer studios. Money got tight. Joe's pension came in every month, but between medication, food, and bills, almost nothing was left. I was never one to ask for help, especially from my children. I'd rather skip buying a blouse or eat a smaller portion than call and hear that impatient sigh on the other end of the line. That's when Patricia started calling more often, not to ask how I was, but to ask very specific things. Mrs. Lords, did you pay the water bill this month? I did. Why? It's just that we can organize these things for you, you know, so there's no risk of forgetting, of getting cut off. Carlos can keep your bills and handle everything online. She said organized like I was a messy drawer. A few days later, Carlos showed up with an envelope. Mom, we're going to help you with the bills, okay? But to do that, it's easier to have everything in one place. He wanted me to hand over my bank card so he could pay everything online. I was tired and ashamed of sounding suspicious, so I gave in. It's just to make things easier, Mom. You don't need to worry about anything. That phrase, which for some people might sound comforting, started to sound like a sentence to me. You don't need to worry about anything has a hidden side because we're going to decide everything for you. The neighbors started noticing I was outside less often. My neighbor across the street, Mrs. Saida, always found a way to call me. Lords, I just made fresh coffee. Come, have a cup. I made up excuses. Later, I'm behind on some sewing. In truth, it was my heart that was behind, stumbling between what I felt and what I heard from them. The more I tried to speak up, the more I was cast as the one who exaggerates everything. One day I gathered the courage to bring up the senior home flyer with Carlos. He'd stopped by just for a minute, as always. Those papers at your place, that brochure, are you really thinking of putting me in one of those places? He frowned, as if I had said something absurd. Mom, are you starting with that again? With what again? I just asked a question. Patricia said you've been nitpicking, seeing problems in everything. Those papers were for work. I told you already. You're mixing things up. Mixing things up. That sentence started showing up a lot. If I forgot where I put my keys. See, your mind's not what it used to be. If I said I felt dizzy in the street. You shouldn't go out alone. Good thing you didn't fall. If I complained about them making decisions over my head. Mom, you're too worked up. You weren't like this. I think you don't remember things properly. It was as if I were losing the right to trust my own memory. The neighbors gradually bought into their version. I could see it in their eyes. One day I heard two ladies whispering on the corner. They say Lords is getting forgetful. Poor thing. Yeah, I heard her kids are looking for a nice place to put her. That's just how it is, nowadays, right? As if it were natural, as if it were inevitable. At church, some of the sisters started treating me like I was made of glass. If you need anything at all, just call. Okay, Lords, they said, in that voice that mixes pity and fear. There was one service where the pastor prayed for me, talking about end of journey and well-earned rest. I came home feeling like the whole world had agreed that my case was closed. The fall on the sidewalk happened one afternoon when I only wanted to buy some bread, nothing more. I went down my front steps like always, but one was a bit broken. My leg gave out, my flip-flop slipped. It was quick. I only remember the dry thud, the impact on my knee, the taste of blood in my mouth because I hit my chin, lying on the ground, staring at the gray sky. I thought, now they have the argument they were missing. A young man passing by helped me up and called an ambulance, even though I insisted I didn't need one. You're bleeding, there's nothing to argue about. At the hospital, the corridor felt even colder than I described before. Maybe because, this time, I already knew what was at stake. I heard Patricia talking to the doctor in a low voice, but not low enough. Doctor, we can't keep bringing her here all the time. You have to be honest with us. Is she still okay in the head? She understands what's going on. I heard the doctor answer, neutral, but you know how old people are. They insist on going back home, but she's already given all she had to give. Keeping up treatment is just making her suffer. The sentence again, this time, complete and even heavier. I squeezed my eyes shut, as if I could turn off the sound, but I couldn't. I was there, alive, listening to someone decide that I had already given all I had to give. The doctor came to talk to me with that didactic tone people use with children. Mrs. Lords, your family is worried. You fell, your leg is injured, your age. Age isn't a diagnosis. Doctor, I cut him off, exhausted. I fell and got hurt. Yes, but I heard everything. He cleared his throat, uncomfortable. You are at risk. Yes, another fall could be worse. Your family is suggesting a longer stay. Someplace with full-time care. In that moment, fear turned into panic. They were suggesting I stay somewhere without my house, my bed, my smell of coffee, a place where I'd be bed 7, the patient in room, such and such. And that's when the real gaslighting began, the heavy kind that makes you doubt yourself. When I said I didn't want to stay, that I wanted to go home, Patricia huffed. See, doctor, she doesn't understand. She has no idea what's best for her. I do understand, I said. I just don't want people deciding for me. Carlos, silent until then, finally spoke. Mom, no one's deciding for you. You're just taking it the wrong way. I heard you, Carlos. I heard everything. You've been hearing what you want, mixing things up, again, mixing things up, interpreting it wrong. The doctor, maybe influenced by their tone, asked me a few quick memory questions. What day is it today? Can you tell me your children's full names? I answered everything without hesitation. Gave him the day, month, year, my address, his name from the badge, the name of the hospital. Inside, I was screaming. I'm here. I'm whole. Even so, the conversation among them went on as if I were a shadow. We can't keep watching her like this, Patricia said, hand on her chest, acting out a drama that seemed pure theater to me right then. It's better if she stays somewhere with professionals. Better for who? I asked, but no one really answered. In the end, the doctor explained the risks, showed me the papers, talked about physiotherapy and follow-up. The family wanted me to stay. I wanted to go home. I signed the discharge against their will. I walked out feeling both victorious and defeated. Victorious because I had made a decision. Defeated because, outside those doors, I knew the world would see me as the stubborn old lady who doesn't know what she's doing. Back at home, the isolation grew even crueler. Carlos started coming by not as a son, but as some sort of inspector. You can't climb on that stool, Mom. I was just going to get a pan. Do you want to fall again? Don't say we didn't warn you. Patricia called almost every day, not to chat, but to check up on me. Did you take your medicine? I did. Are you sure? Carlos said. He found pills lying around. I dropped one. Patricia, that's not a crime. You've been forgetting a lot of things, Mrs. Lords. I caught myself thinking, am I really? Had I misunderstood that lunch? Was the flyer really for a client? Did she really say she's already given all she had to give exactly like that at the hospital? Or did I make it worse in my head? That's what gaslighting does. It's not just that others doubt you, they make you doubt yourself. But in the middle of that fog, a thin line of clarity kept resisting. A little voice inside whispered, "You're not crazy, Lords. They're just a little too comfortable with the idea of deciding for you." It was in that moment of despair that an idea, one that might look like madness at first, started taking shape in my mind. If they were so determined to treat me as incapable, maybe it was time to use that against them. After I was discharged, I started walking slower than I needed to, dragging my foot a bit, more than the pain demanded. Sometimes I pretended I hadn't heard something. Other times I pretended to forget a message. I spent more time sitting in my armchair, staring at the turned-off TV, just to see what they'd say when they thought I wasn't paying attention. I wanted to test them. I wanted to hear full conversations. I wanted to know exactly what they were planning to do with me. That's when, in the middle of all that desperation and pretending to be worse off than I really was, a detail appeared right in front of me and changed everything. Now I'm going to show you what I found, and how it revealed the truth behind the farewell lunch they were secretly planning for me. After I got out of the hospital, I came home feeling like the whole world had decided I was at the end except for one stubborn part inside me. It was a tiny voice, almost choked, saying, "Don't accept it. Don't give up like this." Listening to that voice, I made a decision that, to many people, might seem crazy. I would pretend to be worse than I really was. If they wanted to treat me like I was incapable, I'd use the image they'd created to see what they did when they thought I wasn't looking. So, in those first days at home, I walked more carefully than necessary, dragging my foot a bit, holding on to the wall longer. I'd sit in my armchair and stay quiet, staring into space, like I was switched off. Sometimes, when the phone rang, I'd purposely take longer to answer. Other times, I acted as if I hadn't heard the doorbell, and it worked. Carlos started coming over more often, always with that problem-solver attitude. Patricia came too, but not to keep me company. She came to take inventory. She opened cupboards, rummaged through drawers, checked my documents. "You keep too much stuff, Mrs. Lords," she said, pulling boxes down from the top of the wardrobe. "All this is a hazard, dust, clutter." I answered with a weaker voice than my real strength. "Leave it there, Patricia. I'll deal with it later." "Later when?" she snapped. "You always leave everything for later." One day she came alone. Carlos said he was caught up at work, and she arrived with a supermarket bag and a rehearsed smile. "I brought some things for you. Yogurt, fruit," she said, walking in like the house was already half hers. I was in the armchair, legs stretched out, a blanket over my knees. I'd left the TV on with the sound low. I wanted her to think I was spaced out, but my ears were wide open. She went into the kitchen, started putting away groceries, opened the fridge like it was hers. I closed my eyes from time to time, pretending to doze off, but I didn't miss a word. Then her phone rang loudly, with a cheerful ringtone that didn't match that quiet house at all. "Hi, Anna," I heard her say, and my heart raced. "My daughter." I stayed completely still, breathing slowly. "I'm at your mom's place," Patricia said, turning on the tap as if the running water could drown out her words. "She's really quiet, just like the doctor said she'd be, you know, a bit slow, kind of confused." I took a deep breath, swallowing the urge to get up and shout, "Confused is you, the lunch." "Yes," she went on. "I think it's a great idea to do it before she moves into Pafu, the residence. We'll call it a farewell to the house, but say it's a tribute, that it's to celebrate her life, that kind of pretty speech people love to post online." My blood ran cold. Farewell to the house, before she moves into the residence. I gripped the blanket so tightly that my fingers hurt. "Carlos has already seen 2 care homes," she continued, like she was talking about restaurants. "One is more expensive but has a beautiful outdoor area, great for photos and videos. Those things even help convince the family, you know. Nobody feels like they're dumping their old relative. They feel like they're sending them to a senior spa." She paused and laughed nervously. "Yeah, I know, I talk like that, but you get me. I don't want to go through what I went through with my dad in that awful hospital again. Watching someone fade away like that isn't for me. Better to sort things out beforehand." There, for the first time, I glimpsed a bit of what was pouring under her cruelty. Fear. A fear so big it turned her into stone, but at that moment, I couldn't feel compassion. All I saw was the practical side. Sort things out beforehand meant getting me out of my house while I could still breathe on my own. She went on. "Yeah, I talked to the realtor already. He says, your mom's house, with the way that neighborhood's growing, could sell really well, but it'll need some renovation. He even suggested knocking down some walls. Open plan. That open kitchen counter thing. People love that." Silence on the other end. "No, of course we're not going to tell her that now. First we get her to agree to the care home. Then, it's a different conversation." I felt my heart pounding in my chest. Get her to agree to the care home, then sell the house, knock down walls, open plan kitchen. They were talking about my whole life, as if it were a TV set. Then she said the phrase that tied everything together. "At the lunch, we'll give a beautiful speech, say it's to celebrate her, that it's a moment of gratitude. It'll be the perfect farewell, no one will dare object." Farewell lunch. It wasn't something I'd made up in my tired mind. They were planning it, organizing it, rehearsing every detail, and I, lying in my own living room, was the only one who hadn't been asked about my farewell. While she talked, she moved around the house. At one point, she went into my bedroom. I heard drawers opening, paper rustling. "I found the land deed here, Anna," she said, like she'd found buried treasure. "It was just thrown in a drawer. Imagine if this got lost. We need to sort this out as soon as possible. Carlos will put it in the safe. I knew exactly which drawer that was. I'd kept the house deed there for years. The fully paid land booklet, some of Joe's papers I'd never had the heart to throw away. None of that was thrown around. It was kept with me. Now it was in her hands. A wave of anger and clarity washed over me. They weren't just worried about my health. They were redesigning my life without asking if I wanted it. When the call ended, she came back into the living room, drying her hands on one of my dish towels, like she had just finished tidying up the house that would soon be something else. "Are you okay, Mrs. Lords?" she asked, looking at me and testing whether I'd heard anything. I blinked slowly and spoke in a dragging voice. "I'm just tired." She smiled with a strange relief. "You've been very tired lately, huh? We're going to fix that." Fix that? I already knew what that meant. Over the next few days, the clues multiplied. A realtor's card forgotten on the table. A senior residence flyer tucked in my Bible as a bookmark. A voice message Patricia sent to Carlos that played too loud when he came by and left his phone on the sofa. "Honey, talk to your sister, for God's sake. If she doesn't help now, later she doesn't get to act like the devoted daughter." I collected each piece like someone putting together a puzzle. It wasn't a signed, stamped document, but it was enough to understand the script they'd written for me. Convince the stubborn old lady that she can't live alone anymore. Move her into a nice facility to soothe their guilt. Sell or renovate the house. Get life in order. Carry on. The only thing missing was this. They thought I was going to agree. One afternoon, sitting on the porch, I nearly broke down. The sun was hitting from the side, the smell of coffee drifting from Sida's house across the street, and I felt lonelier than in any cemetery. That's when her voice came over the wall. "Lords, you're different. You've disappeared. What's going on?" I took a deep breath. Until then, I hadn't told anyone what I'd been hearing. I was afraid of sounding crazy, of making their version look even more believable. But that day, something in me asked for help. "Come in for a bit, Sida," I said. "I need to talk to someone who still sees me as a person." She came in, sat in the kitchen chair, and looked straight into my eyes. "Talk." I told her everything. The lunch, the papers, the phone call, the sentence in the hospital. By the time I finished, my tears had already soaked the table. "And they say I'm the one confused, Sida, that I'm making things up." She stayed quiet for a few seconds, then spoke slowly. "Lords, I've known you for more than 20 years. You may be tired, in pain, but you're not crazy. And even if you did forget one thing here and there, that still doesn't give anyone the right to treat you like a package in a move." Her words did more for me than any medicine. It was like someone had handed me back a piece of my sanity. "What do I do, Sida?" She thought for a moment, looked at my swollen knee and my face, full of fear mixed with anger. "First, you need to know exactly what you're dealing with. Know where they want to put you, what papers they're touching, which doctors they're using to back up their story. Information is a weapon. And another thing, you need to get stronger. I'm not just talking about your leg, I mean inside too." There, at that simple kitchen table, I realized I'd just gained an ally, a secret ally. I decided I wasn't going to confront my family. Yet, if I exploded right away, they'd call me hysterical, confused, ungrateful, and use that against me. Instead, I chose strategic silence. I'd keep pretending to be weak on the outside while, on the inside, I gathered proof and strengthened my body and my mind. I needed to know more about that residence, about what the doctor really thought of me, about what was being signed in my name. And to do that, I'd have to do something they've never imagined I still had the courage to do. Leave the house on my own, go after answers, without asking permission. I needed certainty. And that's when I went looking for help, the kind of help that comes from someone who understands health, treatment, and possibilities no one had bothered to explain to me. Now I'm going to tell you who came into the story at that moment without my family suspecting and turned the game completely in my favor. After that conversation with Sida, something inside me clicked. Up until then, I'd only felt fear, anger, and a sadness so heavy it hurt in my bones. But when she said I wasn't crazy, that she'd known me for over 20 years, I realized I still had a foundation, who I really was. "You can't face this with just your heart, Lords," she insisted. "You need information. You have to hear from someone in a white coat what no one has taken the time to explain." That stuck in my mind. At the hospital, the doctor had spoken more to my family than to me. I was the subject, not the person. He said her, the elderly lady, risk of falling, as if I weren't sitting right there, and I let it happen. Not this time. A couple of days later, while Carlos believed I was at home practically immobilized, Sida and I went on our first escape. She showed up early with a big bag and low sandals. "Put on something comfortable, Lords. We're going to the health clinic. me like this. I looked at my leg, still sore, and at the walker Carlos had brought over, practically as a trophy of the incapacity he wanted to pin on me. You're not running a marathon. You're going to sit in front of a doctor and talk as a woman, not as a patient abandoned in a corridor. We ordered a ride on an app that Saida's granddaughter installed on her phone. I got in, slowly, acting weaker than I was, but my heart was firm. It felt strange to move through the streets without my family knowing, almost like I was betraying them. Later, I understood. I wasn't betraying anyone. I was taking off the leash. At the clinic, the air smelled of alcohol and old coffee. We sat in line. Sita spoke loudly on purpose. She fell, but her head's sharp as ever. They just want to dump things on her because being old turned into a synonym for being a burden. Some people looked at us, nodding silently. That gave me strength. When they called my name, I went in alone. Sita stayed outside, waiting for me. The doctor wasn't the same one from the hospital, but I recognized his last name from the stamp on my prescriptions. He was the local GP, the one who always signed my test requests, a man in his 50s, glasses on the tip of his nose, tired but attentive eyes. Mrs. Lords, have a seat, he said, pointing to the chair. Tell me in your own words, what happened. For the first time, someone gave me that chance, in your own words, and I grabbed it. I told him about the fall, the pain in my leg, the hospital, Patricia's conversation with the other doctor, the sentence she's already given all she had to give. As I spoke, my voice trembled not from confusion, but from old indignation finally coming out. He listened without interrupting, jotted down a few notes, looked at me over the paper. Do you remember the name of the hospital? He asked. I told him. The attending doctor. I dug into my memory and pulled it out. Marcelo. He had a blue badge with an old photo. He half smiled, as if confirming something. He's an old colleague of mine from residency, he said, then turned to the computer. I'm going to pull up the report he sent over. He turned the monitor slightly, not enough for me to read everything, but enough to catch a few words. Fall, independent, elderly, family concerned, suggest evaluation for long-term care facility. My stomach flipped. What does that mean? It means that, in his evaluation, you're at risk of falling again, and your family brought up the possibility of a care home. He didn't sugarcoat anything. He didn't invent euphemisms. He said, care home, clearly. And strangely, it hurt less coming from him than from Patricia wrapped in false concern. And what do you think? I asked, steady. Do I still have a chance? He gave a half smile. You're 69, not 169. Your leg is injured. Yes, your knee's compromised. You'll need physiotherapy. Your balance isn't what it was when you were a girl, but your mind. He tapped his forehead. That's working very well. I felt a wave of relief that almost brought me to tears right there. Then, why did they only talk about keeping me in bed, rest, accepting things, back at the hospital? He sighed, folding his arms. I'm going to be honest with you, because that's what you asked for. When the family comes in saying we can't handle this, we can't keep taking care of her, a lot of doctors just follow their lead. It's easier to suggest institutionalization than to get involved in a family mess. And saying I've already given all I had to give. My voice broke again. Does that also fit into this script? He lowered his eyes for a second. That sentence is cruel, but it also comes from ignorance and fear. We sat in silence for a moment. I felt furious again, but this time the anger came with understanding. Your daughter, Enla, mentioned losing her father in a hospital, didn't she? He asked, scrolling the report. She's always talking about it. She saw someone fade away in a bed, depending on everyone, making no decisions at all. For someone with that trauma, solving things early can feel more humane. The problem is, along the way, they forget to look at the person who is still here, capable, conscious. You're not her father. That hit hard. For the first time, someone put Patricia in a place that wasn't just soap opera, villain. What she was doing was still wrong, but I started to see that behind she's already given all she had to give. There was also a woman terrified of her own old age. So, I have options, I asked. Besides a nursing home or another fall. You do, he answered, more firmly now. Physiotherapy, strength training, adapting. Your house, a cane or walker at first. There's a senior group here, guided walks in the square, the right medication at the right time. What you can't do is let yourself be held hostage by other people's fear. Held hostage by other people's fear. I stored that sentence like treasure. And if I want to try, I asked, then it's your decision, he said. I can make the referrals, prescribe physiotherapy, adjust your meds, but I need you to come here because you want to, not in secret, and to tell me what you want. I took a deep breath, a little ashamed. I'm here in secret because if they know I still have options, they'll say I'm delusional. He looked at me, serious. You have the right to choose how you want to live this stage of your life. No one gets to write your final period for you. I left that appointment with a referral in my hand and a new feeling in my chest. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was starting to act. At the clinic door, Saida nearly ripped the paper from my hand. Well, he said, I'm not crazy, I answered, laughing and crying at the same time, and that there's still a lot that can be done for me, if I want it. Then we're going to want it, she declared. And we're going to do it quietly. Physiotherapy was scheduled at a rehab center on the other side of the neighborhood. Carlos would never suspect anything. He was certain I was at home, wilting. Saida made a plan with her granddaughter. When you go to college, stop by and take Lourdes to the street market. We'll call it the market, but it's physio. On the first day, I arrived nervous. The room was simple, colorful balls, bars, mats, a young man, about 20-something, wearing a white t-shirt with his name embroidered on it, Rafa, physical therapist. He smiled when he read my referral. So you're Lourdes, the famous sidewalk fall. I laughed, embarrassed. Famous? No, just stubborn. Stubbornness can be fuel sometimes, he replied. Tell me, what's your goal? I was going to say not to fall again, but the truth slipped out before I could stop it. I want to walk on my own. I want to show up at a family lunch still standing. He raised an eyebrow, curious, but didn't ask anything else. He just said, then let's work for that. We started slowly, stretching, light exercises, balance training. In the beginning, even my pride hurt. I trembled on the bar, my knee creaked, my breathing failed, but Rafa didn't treat my pain as a sentence. He treated it as a passage. It hurts because what was stopped is waking up, he explained. Old isn't who has age, it's who stops moving on the inside. That sentence kept echoing in my head. Old isn't who has age, it's who stops moving on the inside. Between one exercise and another, he asked, in a low voice, can I ask you an indiscreet question? At my age, son, there's hardly anything more indiscreet than what we've already lived through. Why did you set all this up on your own, in secret? Most people come brought in by a child, a grandchild. I took a deep breath and summed it up. The plan for the care home, the farewell lunch, my daughter-in-law's sentence. His face grew serious. So you're training to ruin their party? Not to ruin it, I corrected him. To change the script. They think they're going to say goodbye to a worn-out old woman. I want them to see something else when I walk through that door. He laughed, impressed. I want to see that. From then on, Rafa became my technical ally and my accomplice. He adjusted the exercises so I wouldn't hurt myself too much, explained what was happening with my leg, showed me what was effort and what was risk. And, most importantly, he never spoke to me like I was a lost cause. Lourdes, I can't promise a miracle, he said, but if you stick with it, you can get to that lunch, walking steady, maybe with a cane, maybe without, but a lot more in charge of yourself than you are now. I'd come back home with either Saida or her granddaughter, taking quieter streets so I wouldn't run into anyone and feed gossip. When I got home, I'd tuck the walker away in a corner, sit in my armchair, pull the blanket over my legs, and turn the TV on mute. When Carlos showed up, he always found me exhausted, a bit out of it. I let him believe it. You're very quiet, Mom, he'd say, smoothing my hair like I was fragile. It's the medicine, I'd answer. And he'd leave a little calmer, thinking their plan was moving along just as expected. Meanwhile, the farewell lunch was taking shape. Anna called one day, excited. Mom, Carlos had a beautiful idea, to have lunch at your house, bring the family and neighbors together to celebrate you. We're calling it a farewell to the house, but in a good way, okay? It's just to mark this new phase. I almost laughed at in a good way. New phase for who? My girl, for everyone. You in a place with more care, the house renovated, the neighborhood, getting more valuable. It'll be better, I agreed. Not because I believed it, but as strategy. All right, Anna, if that's what you all think is best. On the other end of the line, I could feel her relief. It's going to be beautiful, Mom, you'll see. They really had no idea. In one of the last physio sessions before the lunch, Rafa had me walk from one wall to the other without holding on to anything. I went slowly, focused, feeling every muscle work. When I reached the other side, he clapped his hands. That's it. I'm still limping, I said, looking down at my foot. Limping or not, you're walking. And more than that, you're walking by your own decision. That day, I left the rehab center with a quiet certainty. I already knew everything about the plan, the care home, the sale of the house, the rehearsed farewell, and they had no idea that while they were setting a date, menu, and guest list, I was planning my own kind of turning point. I wasn't going to stop the lunch. On the contrary, I'd let everything happen. They would decorate the house, dress the table, set the stage, and when the time came, I would use that very stage to hand back every sentence they'd thrown on me, only in a way no one would ever forget. Now, I'm going to tell you how I prepared myself, inside and out, for the day of my farewell, and how I turned that family gathering into the perfect setting for my rebirth. The day of that farewell lunch crept closer like a storm on the horizon, slowly, but inevitably. The difference was that, this time, I wasn't just waiting for the rain to fall on my head. I was sharpening my umbrella, choosing my outfit, and deciding exactly where I'd stand when the sky opened. On the outside, I was still the tired old woman they wanted to see. On the inside, every session with Rafa, every conversation with Sita, was another brick in the new house I was building inside myself. A house with no bars, no problem label, no sign reading, "She's already given all she had to give." A few days before the lunch, Carlos showed up with a printed chart. He sat in front of me in the kitchen like my project manager. "Mom, look how nice this is," he said, pushing the paper toward me. Patricia organized everything: menu, schedule, guests. "It's going to be a beautiful tribute." On the sheet I read, starter, main course, dessert, toast, children's speech, and at the end, in parentheses, official presentation of the decision about the care home. My name wasn't on any line, as someone deciding anything. I was the theme of the party, not the owner of my own life. "Tribute?" I asked, making my voice come out a little hoarse. "And what do I do?" He smiled. "The way you talk to a child you're trying to cheer up. You just need to be there, sitting nicely, quietly. Leave the rest to us." Sitting nicely, quietly. I wanted to laugh. If only he knew how much I no longer fit in that chair they'd pulled out for me. Patricia started coming over almost every day to get the house ready. She opened windows, took down curtains, moved pictures around. "This living room is way too dark," she muttered, dragging the sofa. "The realtor said if we open up the space, it'll feel bigger." "Patricia," I called, feigning tiredness. "Just be careful with my things, okay? You get attached to so much old stuff, Mrs. Lords," she answered, without looking at me. "It'll be great to see all this renewed." It was curious, as she walked through the house talking about renovation. Every now and then, her face gave away a crack of fragility. It was quick, but I saw it, a tremor in her hand. Whenever she heard an ambulance siren in the street, an odd silence when someone on TV said "I see you," or hospitalization. At certain moments, it felt like she wasn't really fighting me, but a ghost only she could see. The ghost of her father in a hospital bed. But right then, I couldn't take care of her ghost. I was too busy bringing myself back to life. At night, when the house was empty, and only the smell of disinfectant and fried garlic remained, I practiced. I'd slowly stand up from my armchair, straighten my shoulders, adjust my posture, walk to the living room door, counting steps, noticing every muscle in my leg. Sometimes my knee protested, but I breathed deeply and remembered Rafa's sentence. "It hurts, because what was stopped is waking up." I also rehearsed my words, in front of the mirror, hair hastily tied back. I'd start. "Today, I want to say thank you." I'd stop. That wasn't it. Gratitude without truth is just decoration. I'd try again. "Today, I need to correct a sentence that was spoken about me." In my mind, I'd go back to that hospital corridor. I saw the white coat, heard "she's already given all she had to give" echoing off the walls. I felt the same shame, the same anger, but now there was something else mixed in. Courage. "I'm going to give that sentence back in front of everyone," I promised myself, but my way. On the eve of the lunch, I barely slept. Not because I was scared of what they'd decide. That I already knew. They had decided. I was afraid my own body wouldn't hold up. Afraid my leg would fail at the wrong moment. That I'd trip in the middle of the living room and hand even more proof to those who swear I'm a danger to myself. In the middle of the night, I got up quietly, braced a hand on the table and walked to the door. I opened it gently. The cold air from outside slipped in, carrying the smell of damp earth. "My God," I whispered, "if there's still anything reserved for me beyond rest, help me tomorrow. Even if I limp to the middle of that room, at least let me get there on my own." 2 feet. The morning of the big day, the house turned into an anthill. People coming and going, pots clanging, the smell of roasting meat and fluffy rice, oil popping in the pan. Patricia ran, everything with a notebook in hand. "Anna, check if there's enough room at the table for a wheelchair in case your mom's really tired." "Mom hates wheelchairs." "Patricia," Anna snapped, annoyed. "And what do you prefer? For her to fall in front of everyone?" Listening from my room, I wanted to shout, "I'm not going to fall," but I held back. The plan was different. Next door, Saida helped me get ready. Since early morning, I'd gone over to her house for coffee, like we used to do. Only this time, it wasn't about coffee. It was about strategy. There, away from Carlos and Patricia's eyes, I could get ready the way I wanted. This floral dress looks good on you, Lords, she said, holding up a dress I almost never wore. It has color, life. You're not going to a funeral. Feels like I am, I muttered. Today, if everything goes right, this isn't a funeral, it's a resurrection. We laughed, but I knew deep down it was true. I put some hand cream on something cheap and simple that I always forgot to use. My skin seemed grateful. I fixed my hair more carefully, pulling out a few loose strands to soften my face. Saida's granddaughter lent me a wine-colored lipstick. Grandma, she's going to look powerful, she joked. She's going to make everyone swallow that already gave all she had to give nonsense. When I finished getting ready, I looked at myself in Saida's living room mirror. For a second, I didn't recognize my own image. It felt like years since I'd really seen myself. The woman in front of me had wrinkles, white hair, little spots on her skin, but also steady eyes and a lifted chin. You look beautiful, Lord Saida said, coming closer. But more than that, you look present. Right before the scheduled time, Rafa stopped by. He said he was just passing through, but I knew he'd made sure to pass by exactly then. Final checkup, he joked, half serious. Walk to that wall for me. I went, one step, then another. My knee protested, but it held. I reached the wall, touched it, came back. You're ready, he said. Will you limp a bit? Sure, but whoever never limped in life can. Throw the first stone. I laughed. And if you fall, you get back up, he replied, without hesitation. Just don't go back to that chair they were trying to put you in for good. I took a deep breath, grabbed my simple handbag with my documents, keys, and a scarf. Saida smoothed the fabric over my waist, and her granddaughter snapped a photo in secret, so I can remember later that I was in the front row for this show, she joked. We left the house together, the three of us, but parted at the corner. They would go down one street, I'd take another. I didn't want to arrive as part of a little procession. I needed to walk in alone. From a distance, I could already see my house looking different. Discreet balloons, a white banner reading, "Thank you, Lords," a few tables and chairs borrowed from the church set up in the yard, people at the gates, laughter, the smell of food spreading down the street. It looked like a birthday party. But inside, I knew that, to them, it was more like a living funeral. I stopped a little before the corner, hiding behind a tree. From there, I could hear without being seen. The living room window was open. Patricia's voice carried clearly. Everyone, thank you for coming. Today is a very special day for our family. Lords deserves this farewell to her house. All this affection. Farewell to her house. I closed my eyes for a second. Her house. As if I'd already signed everything away. As if what I wanted was just a detail. I heard Anna's softer voice. Patricia, are you sure you have to call it a farewell? It's symbolic, Anna. Accept it. Your mother needs to understand it's what's best. With every word, my heart hammered against my chest. Fear took a step forward, but right behind it came a courage I didn't even know I still had. Someone tapped a spoon against a glass. The sharp sound cut through the chatter. Everyone, attention, Carlos said. Let's start the toast to my mother. I gripped the gate handle, felt the cold metal against my warm palm. In a few seconds I'd no longer be the woman hiding behind a tree, or the somewhat confused patient they described. In a few seconds, I'd cross that doorway on my own leg limping, but mine, with my own voice shaky but mine. It was time for the toast, time for the speech, and they still thought they knew exactly what I was going to do. Listen, and stay quiet. Now I'm going to tell you what I said in front of everyone, and how the sentence she's already given all she had to give never sounded the same again after that day. When I opened the gate, it felt like I was pushing much more than iron. It was as if I were opening, with the same hand, the door to my own sentence, or my freedom. Voices floated in from the yard, mixed with the smell of roast meat, the clink of cutlery, slightly forced laughter. I took the first step inside. My leg complained, but obeyed. My floral dress swayed lightly. I could feel the lipstick on my mouth like armor. No one saw me at first. Everyone was facing the big table where Carlos stood, holding up a glass. The white "Thank you, Lord's" banner stretched across the living room wall like a bad joke. I moved forward, slowly, but without leaning on anything. Only when I reached the doorway did Anna see me. Mom. Carlos's glass froze in midair. Patricia, standing beside him, turned and went pale. I kept walking until I reached the middle of the room. The clatter of cutlery began to die down. People murmured, "Look at Lords, she's walking." I smiled, not to be nice, but because I knew what was coming. "Good afternoon." My voice came out steady. "I'm here." For a moment, no one knew what to do. The scene they'd rehearsed was completely different. Me in a wheelchair, or wobbling on someone's arm, being guided to a chair, strategically placed in a corner. Instead, there I was, on my feet, in the center of the room, looking everyone in the eye. Carlos reacted first. "Mom, what is this? You shouldn't walk," I cut in. "Shouldn't decide when I come into my own house." A murmur rippled through the room. Sita, leaning quietly near the door, looked at me with pride practically shining out of her. "Mom, sit here. We were going to call you." Anna jumped up, pulling out a chair. "Not yet," I said. "Today I'm going to speak standing." I looked at the glass in Carlos's hand. "What were you going to toast to, my son? To my move to the residence? To my farewell? To the house?" He swallowed hard and lowered the glass a little. "Mom, don't start like this." "Like what? Aware." On my feet, Patricia, who hadn't said a word yet, tried to pull the script back on track. "Everyone, calm down. The idea today is to celebrate Lourdes, to be grateful for her story, for this house, for the house especially, right, Patricia?" I turned toward her, because as for the person, you were all ready to ship me off. Some people coughed, others dropped their gaze, a few neighbors opened their eyes wide, not understanding. I took a deep breath. It was time to do the one thing I'd never done in my entire life. Instead of swallowing everything, I was going to put it all out there. "Since you've started the speech, Patricia, let me continue it my way." I walked to the side of the table and rested my hand on the back of a chair more to mark my place than out of need. I looked around. "First of all, thank you for coming." People looked at each other, confused. "It's good to see this house full. For many years, that's why I lived. To see this house full of people, of family, of life." Silence. You could probably have heard a fly. "Me alegra tenerte aquí, Primera Said," without taking my eyes off the banner, because today, for the first time, I'm not going to be just decoration in this story. I'm going to be the voice. I saw Patricia's eyes widen. She didn't understand the Spanish, but she understood this. Wasn't the same old Lourdes. "You all know I fell, hurt my leg, ended up in the hospital." I went on. "What maybe a lot of you don't know is what I heard in that cold corridor while I still had the taste of blood in my mouth." Several people stole glances at Patricia. She shifted in her chair. "I heard my own daughter-in-law say to the doctor, 'Don't waste your time. She's already given all she had to give.'" I repeated it, word for word. The impact was immediate. A lady from church put her hand over her mouth. A neighbor murmured, "My God." My grandchildren, not really understanding, looked from their father to their mother. Lourdes, Patricia started, red-faced. "Calm down, Patricia." I lifted my hand. "You'll get to talk, but right now, I'm the one talking. I've spent my life listening, swallowing things, leaving them for later. My later has arrived." Carlos slowly set his glass down on the table. "Mom," Patricia was nervous. "You misunderstood." I understood perfectly. "Carlos," I looked him straight in the eye, and that wasn't the only thing I understood. I breathed deeply and let it all out. I understood that senior home brochure I saw on your sideboard. I understood the phone call about a farewell lunch for the house before the residential. I understood the realtor checking what my house is worth, the planned renovation, the walls you want to knock down. I understood the "you're not going to live forever," the "it's better to sort it out now," that she's confused, limited, doesn't know what's best for her. Heads slowly turned toward Carlos and Anna, looking for confirmation on their faces. They were exposed. "Do you know why I'm walking like this today?" I asked, lifting my chin a little. "It's not a soap opera miracle. I didn't just wake up cured. It's because while you were treating me like I was already done, I went looking for people who still saw me as a beginning. I could feel my heart racing, but I didn't stop. I went to the doctor on my own. I heard a surprised "oh." He told me, yes, I have limitations, that I might fall again, that I'm not 20 anymore. But he also told me something no one here had the courage to say, that I still have a choice, that old age is not the same as being stored away, that your fear cannot be in charge of my life. My eyes met Patricia's. Hers were full of tears, and she was squeezing her napkin so hard it looked like it might tear. "I did physiotherapy in secret," I went on. "While you thought I was withering in my armchair, I was training for this." I took 2 steps forward to show them. "To walk into this farewell lunch on my own 2 feet." Saida smiled discreetly. Rafa, standing at the back near the gate, tried to make himself small, but I saw the pride shining in his eyes, and you know what? My voice shook, but I didn't. "Today I'm not here to beg to stay in my house, or to bargain over how many days I'll still be a lot of work. I'm here today to give back the sentence you threw on me." I looked around, making a point of looking at every familiar face. "She's already given all she had to give," you said. "Well, I say now, I've already given all I had to give, as the mother who erases herself, as the widow who accepts any leftover scraps of attention, as the old woman who bows her head when others decide for her. That role is finished. That I don't want any more. The silence grew heavy. I could feel the air vibrating. I am not going to a care home, I said, clearly, not because I think every place like that is bad, but because I can still walk, still think, still make my own coffee, because I still have too much life to fit into a numbered room. Anna started crying. Mom, I know what you just, I interrupted, softer but still firm. You're tired, scared, overwhelmed. It's not easy watching your mother fall. Seeing age catching up. Patricia carries a huge trauma from what happened to her father in the hospital, and she dumped it on me like a piano on the back of someone already bent over. But none of that justifies treating me like a parcel ready to be shipped. I turned back to my daughter-in-law. Patricia, I heard you say you didn't want to watch someone fade away again, so let me tell you this, I am not fading, I'm fighting. The difference is big. She started sobbing, her hands shaking. I just can't stand seeing. She tried, but the words tangled. I took another deep breath. I had all the reason in the world to throw every bit of my anger in her face, but in that moment, I realized that if I did, I'd only be trading one injustice for another. I wanted more than to win. I wanted to turn the page. I am not your father, Patricia, I said firmly. I'm not in that bed. I'm not hooked up to machines. I'm here, talking to you. If you have the courage to see me as I am today, not as the future you're terrified of, we might still understand each other, but it comes with a price. I will no longer accept being called a burden, a problem, an old woman who's already given all she had to give. Never again. I turned to the table, the banner, the flowers, and since you called this a farewell to the house, let me make it clear what I'm saying. Goodbye to today. I paused for a second, feeling everyone hold their breath. Today I'm saying goodbye to the role of burden. I'm saying goodbye to the Lords who waits for her children to decide how she should live. I'm saying goodbye to this dead house that only opens when there's a scheduled visit. Someone whispered, "What do you mean?" I smiled, for the first time tasting the surprise I'd been preparing. I'm not going to live somewhere else, I said, but I am going to live differently. From now on, this house is no longer the storage room for an old mother. It's going to be a place of life. I've already talked to the doctor, to physiotherapy, and to Sita. I'm going to start a stretching group for seniors twice a week out in the yard. The living room is going to be used for reading circles, prayer, and conversation. The kitchen will be for teaching simple recipes to folks who live alone. I saw some eyes light up. Others looked scared. If anyone wants to see me, they'll find me moving. If anyone wants to respect me, they'll have to come in here and see me active, deciding, making mistakes, starting over. If all they want is to control me, they can stay outside. Finally, I turned to Carlos. His eyes were full of tears, the glass forgotten in his hand. Mom, I'm not cutting anyone out of my life, Carlos, I said, gentler now. But if someone wants to stay in it, it'll be on my time, my pace, and at my address, and without hiding plans behind my back. I let go of the chair and took a few more steps through the middle of the room. My knee protested. I felt it, but I didn't stop. You organized this lunch thinking you were saying goodbye to me. I managed a smile. Well, just so you know, I'm the one saying goodbye. I'm saying goodbye to the version of me you all got used to using as an excuse. From today on, if anyone wants to say she's already given all she had to give, they'll have to say it looking at me like this, and have the courage to finish the sentence. She's already given all she had to give, of blind obedience. I put a hand over my heart, feeling it race, because when it comes to love, to story, and to life, my children, I still have a lot left to give. No one said anything for a few seconds that felt like hours. I felt an enormous weight lift off my back. I didn't know exactly what things would look like after that. Who would stay? Who would walk away? Who would dare to apologize? But one thing I knew, I had given myself back to myself. When I stepped out of that place, that position, as an object, that invisible chair they'd sat me in for years, I knew nothing would ever be the same. Now I'm going to tell you what happened to each of them after that day, how the villains fell, how the masks dropped, and how I began rebuilding my life, not as a burden, but as the main character. After I finished speaking, the silence in that living room was so thick you could hear the ticking of the kitchen clock. No one knew where to look. Some avoided my face, others stared at the floor, like they were at a funeral. Only that day, if anything had died, it wasn't me. It was the pact of silence my family had made around me. The first one to break the silence was the one who'd always seemed the strongest, Patricia. She'd gone very pale, eyes wide, still crushing the napkin in her fist. For a second, I thought she might lunge at me in anger, but something else came instead. I need to sit down, she whispered. She tried to step back, but her body faltered. Carlos grabbed her arm. Patricia, she pressed a hand to her chest, breathing fast, tears pouring all at once, without shame, without mask. I'm not a bad person, she said between sobs. I'm not this monster it looks like. Someone brought her water. Another neighbor fanned her with a dish towel. I stood still, watching. For the first time, I saw the woman who had hurt me so deeply, not as a soap opera villain, but as a broken human being. Sit down, Patricia, I said, pointing to a chair. My voice was firm, but not harsh. No, one is going to fall here today, at least not on the floor. She sat, her whole body trembling. She looked at me like a child caught doing something awful. I saw my father. She started, choking. I watched him fade away in a filthy hospital, with no one explaining anything, with no say in anything. I'd go visit and he didn't recognize me. I spent years having nightmares about it. I swore I'd never go through that again. People moved in closer, curious, uncomfortable. The perfect, organized daughter-in-law mask was on the floor. When you fell, all I saw was him again, she went on. The hospital smell, the sound of machines, the bed, everything the same. I panicked, and in my panic, I just wanted to get the problem out of the way, admit you, sort things, sell the house, anything to stop me from having to watch someone die slowly again. She covered her face with her hands. I said that to the doctor. She's already given all she had to give, because She breathed in hard, almost shouting. I didn't want to watch the same story play out again. I was thinking about me, not about you. It was selfish. It was cowardly. Those words could have sounded like patchwork, a ready-made excuse, but they didn't. They came raw and ugly, with no bow on top. I recognized that because, for many years, I'd also made decisions based more on fear than anything else. Patricia, I said, moving a little closer. Slowly, fear doesn't justify everything, but I'd much rather deal with your fear laid bare than with your pretend coldness. She raised her head, eyes swollen. Do you hate me? I breathed. The truth is, for a long time I wanted to. But at that moment, I chose something else. No, I don't hate you, but I won't let you play owner of my life anymore just to lighten your pain. Your trauma has no right to live in my house giving orders. Carlos was crying silently. It was the first time I saw my son cry like a man, not like a boy, with a skinned knee. Mom, I was a coward, he blurted. I saw how she talked. I knew it was wrong, but I was so tired, so overwhelmed with work and bills that I let her decide everything. It was easier. I looked at him with a mix of sadness and relief. You didn't defend me, I said. That's the part that hurt the most. I know, he answered, without making excuses. And I'll carry that, but if you'll let me, I want to learn to be a different kind of son from now on. There was no audience that could fix that, no pretty phrase. I knew real change wouldn't happen in that room in that minute. But, for the first time, I heard their truth without filters. Fear, exhaustion, selfishness. It wasn't some evil master plan, it was a cowardly one. From that moment on, lunch never got its party mood back. People ate in half silence, some left early, others came to hug me. You were brave, Lord's a church sister said, holding my hands. Old isn't who has age, it's who accepts everything quietly. In the days that followed, the consequences started to show, each in its own way. The neighbors began to look at Carlos and Patricia differently, not with hatred, but with that. We know what you did. Look at church. The pastor, who'd had a whole end of journey, speech ready for me, approached the family after service. Looks like we buried Lourdes before her time, right? He said, embarrassed. Anna kept her distance for a few days. Not because she was angry with me, but because she was ashamed of herself. Then one day, she showed up at my door with puffy eyes. Mom, I was so busy being successful that I let you turn into a spreadsheet in other people's hands, she confessed. I called too little, came too little, listened too little. But you came now, I answered, opening the door. And if we're going to rebuild, it's never too late. With Patricia, it wasn't quick. For the first few days, she disappeared. Only Carlos came by, awkward, bringing fruit and medicine, looking at the house like it was new territory. One day, he came in and set an envelope on the table. What's this? I asked. Your documents back, he said. Serious. Deed, land papers, all of it. They were with Patricia. Now they're staying here, where they always belonged, with you. I opened the envelope, saw the papers, and ran my hand over them like someone stroking an old photograph. It was more than paper. It was a sign that, at least this time, no one was going to mess with my story without my signature. Patricia returned weeks later. She rang the bell, but I'd already seen her silhouette at the gate. Her face was thinner, her eyes marked. Can I come in? She asked. without that lady of the house tone. You can, I replied, but leave the realtor's plans outside. She gave a small, awkward smile. We sat in the kitchen. The silence was heavy, but this time, I wasn't afraid of it. I started therapy, she said suddenly. The psychologist said I used you as a shield for my fear of getting old, that I treated your old age like a punishment, not a phase. And what are you going to do with that? I asked. I'm learning not to fix my pain by deciding other people's future. She sighed. And if you still let me, I'd like to help this house really be that place of life you talked about. But help for real, not bossing, washing dishes, chopping vegetables, bringing people. I looked at her for a few seconds. I wasn't going to forget what she'd said at the hospital. I wasn't going to pretend it hadn't happened. But I also didn't want to cling to that scene for the rest of my life. I can forgive you, Patricia, but I won't forget. And it's good that you don't forget either. Memory is a fence. It reminds us where we can't walk again. She nodded, crying softly. I accept that, she said. And I want to listen to you. When I cross the line, you tell me. Don't swallow it anymore. That's when I realized I didn't have to turn to stone to stop being a doormat. I could set boundaries without becoming a monster. While my family handled their own guilt and shame, life around me started to move. The yard, which had been empty most of the time, became a meeting point. Rafa came one afternoon, brought by Saida's granddaughter, and looked over the space. We can put some mats here, a few chairs there, a portable bar over here, he said, pointing. If you're up for it, we can start a stretching group. I'm up for it, I answered. But on one condition, no calling it activities for old folks, who don't have anything left to do. This is for people who still want to live better with the time they have. I spread the news on the street, at church, in the clinic line. If you want to stretch, move your body, and talk about life, come to my place on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. No money, just bring the will. On the first day, came me, Sita, an old lady from down the street who was afraid even to get up from the couch, and a grumpy retired man who said this won't do anything while he stretched and sweated. On the second day, 7, on the third, more. The yard filled with laughter, heavy breathing, plastic cups of water, and long chats after exercise. The living room turned into a space for reading and prayer circles. Anna, trying to make up for her absence a little, started coming on Saturdays with books she thought I'd like. One day, she admitted, Mom, sometimes I feel like quitting the office and working with real people like you do. First learn to be real people with me, I smiled. The rest, time will show. I made changes for myself, too. I started group therapy at the clinic, with other women, sharing fears, losses, and anger. Listening to their stories helped me see mine wasn't the only one, and that in my own way, I'd pulled on a rope others could grab onto. I learned to say no without apologizing. To hang up when a conversation turned into judgment dressed up as concern. To say, I can't have visitors today, it's my rest day, without guilt. Little by little, I realized the villains falling didn't show up as headlines or gossip. It was quieter than that. It was the fall of the certainty that they were in charge of everything. Carlos had to learn to ask, Mom, what do you want? Instead of Mom, I've already decided for you. Patricia had to swallow her pride and hear the neighbors say, it was a good thing Lourdes said everything that day, huh? We needed to hear it too. They lost control. They lost the image of perfect children taking care of Mom the right way. They lost the comfort of a plan that would spare them from the emotional responsibility of dealing with my old age. And me, what did I gain? First, I gained the right to look in the mirror and see someone who is not waiting to be pushed into a corner. I gained muscle in my leg, yes, but I gained far more strength in my voice. I gained new friends with white hair, bad knees, crooked backs, but bright eyes. I gained respect from the old and the young. Deep down, I knew there was still one last step I needed to take, something that would seal this new phase for good and surprise even those who thought they'd already understood my turning point. Something that had nothing to do with selling the house or not, and everything to do with who I chose to be from now on. Because the most important thing wasn't what they lost, it was what I gained when I finally accepted that the full stop in my story doesn't belong to anyone but me. Now I'm going to tell you who I became after all this, what was the most surprising decision I made in old age, and what, truly, is the biggest lesson this whole story left me. Some time has passed since that farewell lunch that turned into a beginning. Sometimes I close my eyes and still see it, the white banner on the wall, the smell of roast meat, the silence after my speech. But when I look at my life today, it almost feels like that earlier Lourdes was someone else. Not because everything turned into a fairy tale. My knee still hurts on rainy days. I still lose my glasses every now and then. There are mornings when I wake up tired before I even get out of bed. Old age is still old age, with its aches and limits. The difference is that now, in my mind, it's not a synonym for the end anymore. It's a phase, a chapter, and I'm the one, holding the pen. A few months after that lunch, the house felt completely different. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, the yard filled with people. Sita, Mr. Antonio, Ms. Rita, the grumpy retired man, who secretly loves the group, two new ladies who joined later, a shy teenage girl who started coming just to accompany her grandmother. Rafa came whenever he could, sometimes sending a colleague. The plastic chairs out back became almost like park benches. We stretched, laughed at our own stiffness, and talked about everything. Fear, longing, politics, pills, old dreams that still might fit into the time we have left. In the living room, the reading circle grew. Anna started bringing books, and one Saturday surprised me. Mom, there's a free life writing course at the cultural center. You don't want to try it? I laughed. A course, Anna, at my age, she replied. Since when does age decide what you can learn? I ended up going. I sat in a room with people of all ages, pen in hand, blank notebook. The teacher said, today, the exercise is to write a scene from your life that you never had the courage to tell your way. I looked at the paper, thought of the hospital corridor, the sentence she's already given, all she had to give, the cold wheelchair, and started writing. It felt strange to realize that beyond telling it out loud, I could also register it, as if putting it on paper confirmed it for myself. This happened, I saw it, I felt it, and I survived. It was during those days of the course that I made the most surprising decision of my old age. It happened in a simple way, like the things that really change us usually do. Rafa had mentioned that the hospital where I had been treated had a volunteer program, especially for the elderly ward. They need people who sit with them, listen, read a psalm, keep them company, he said. Sometimes being there is worth more than medicine. I laughed it off, defensive. You want me to go back to the place where they said I'd already given all I had to give? He shrugged. Maybe it's the perfect place to show you haven't, but it's your call. It stayed in my head. I took a while to admit it, but I was afraid of going back. At the same time, a voice whispered, how many Lord E's are lying in those beds right now, hearing similar things and believing them. One day, I found the courage. I went in with a simple volunteer badge around my neck, heart pounding, the same disinfectant smell in the air. I walked through the corridor and almost saw myself again, sitting in that wheelchair, hearing the sentence that knocked me down. Only this time, I was on my feet. I started slowly. I'd sit beside a lady who had just fallen, a man complaining that his kids never showed up, a woman who could only cry without saying a word. I didn't have a formula. Sometimes I just held a hand. Other times, I shared a piece of my story. Never all of it, just enough for them to realize they weren't crazy, and they weren't alone. One day, a patient looked me in the eye and said, the nurse told me I'm on my way out, that I should just accept it. I took a deep breath. Let me tell you something, I said softly. One day someone said about me that I'd already given all I had to give. I believed it for a few hours. Then I found out I still had a lot to give, just not in the way they expected. She smiled faintly, even in pain. And what are you giving now? Time, I answered. And an ear. And a story. Over time, the staff started calling me by a nickname they invented. Lords from Still Has More to Give. I laughed when I first heard it, but I liked it. It was as if I'd turned into the opposite of the sentence that had wounded me. At home, things settled into a new place too. Carlos learned to call me not only about pills, but to talk about work, ask for recipes, tell silly stories. Sometimes he arrives exhausted and drops into the kitchen chair like he did as a teenager. Mom, today I just want to be your son, not the man who solves everything, he admits. Then sit and complain all you want, I say, pouring coffee. The man who solves everything only exists in other people's imagination. Here, you can just be Carlos. Patricia slowly found the courage to show up without her mask. One day she looked at the yard full of people stretching and said, almost shyly, if there had been a place like this for my father back then, maybe I wouldn't be so terrified. Today, I looked at her and said, you're not to blame for what they did to him, but you are responsible for what you were about to do to me. That's the difference. She nodded. And that day, for the first time, she stayed until the end of the circle, listening to old people's stories without hiding in her phone. Anna drew closer in her own way. One Saturday, I saw her arrive with no rush, no work, briefcase, just a simple cake in her hands. This writing course is tying my brain in knots, Mom, she laughed. Every time I think of an important story to tell, you show up in front of me. Then tell it, I said. Just remember, I'm not a side character in yours, and you're not in mine. Each of us writes her own with the pen she has. These days, my routine is different. In the mornings, when my body allows, I stretch in the yard, listen to birds, talk to God in my way. In the afternoon, some days I go to the hospital to volunteer. Some days I host the group at home. Some days I simply rest without guilt. Am I still afraid sometimes? Yes. Afraid of falling, of becoming too dependent of my mind, really failing one day. But when those fears come, I remember what the doctor said back then. You can't be held hostage by other people's fear. And I add, not by your own, either. My relationship with my family didn't turn into a commercial for happy margarine breakfasts. There's still friction. There are still days when Carlos slips into that old habit of deciding for me, still moments when Patricia wants to solve everything with a spreadsheet. The difference is that now, I talk, I set boundaries, and when they cross them, I pull them back, sometimes with firmness, sometimes with humor. Careful, boy, I tell Carlos when he starts making too many plans. That speech is starting to smell like already gave all she had to give in disguise. He laughs, but he understands. If you asked me today who I am, I wouldn't just say Carlos and Aina's mother. I'd say, I'm Lourdes, woman, widow, 69 years old, volunteer, hostess of a busy backyard, improvised stretching coordinator, storyteller. I am old, yes, but I'm not full stop old. I'm new paragraph old. And the biggest lesson in all this, that old isn't who has age. Old is who lets others write the full stop in their story. Back at that hospital, they tried to put that full stop on me with one cruel sentence. She's already given all she had to give. Today, I look back and answer. I've already given all I had to give. Of silence, of blind obedience, of accepting anything, in the name of family. Now, what I have left to give is choice, boundaries, and a kind of love that no longer confuses itself with being used. And as long as I have a voice to tell my story, and a leg even limping to walk through the door of my own decisions, the full stop to my story hasn't arrived yet.